It's a more practical place for me to... No. Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello. How are you, Mr. Mike? So for anybody who is not sure what they're going to be watching a live of, we're doing a book reading. I'm doing great. Also, thank you. We're doing a book reading. We are actually in a series at this point by Amelia Atwater Rhodes. And this is the third book, the third installation of a series of 5. I think it's 5 books at this Yes, 5 books for this series. So if you have either missed some of my previous readings or if you have missed all of them, you actually can go onto my YouTube channel and I have all of the recordings of the book readings listed in sequential order, so that way you don't have to guess as to what needs to be, what needs to be watched next. So you can catch up if you want to, or if you're a recurring viewer, you can go back and listen to some of the readings if you want. So it's an intriguing series. It's an easy read. As you can see, it's a very small book. Like, none of the books in this series are big. So if you're just kind of getting into reading, or if you just need some light reading, a series like this is really good to get into because it's engaging, but it's not like Lord of the Rings or the Silmarillion or anything like that. So we'll give it till about 5 after for some people to log on, because I got logged in a little bit late. So, but if you don't know what's going on, I hope you can at least kind of stick around and kind of get an idea of what we're reading. Or if you have this book at home, feel free to follow along. Feel free to follow along as I'm going. I am from the East Coast, USA. Where are you from, Mike? No, I actually have not been to California before. It's on my list. It's definitely on my list of places to go see. But no, I haven't been there. I haven't been there yet. So if you have any recommendations as to places to go, things to see in California, feel free to let me know. Julie! Hello! Ishmael, hi! All right. I hope everyone's had a good weekend so far and a good start of the week. And we are going to go ahead and dive in. For anyone who's following along, we're currently on chapter 4. It's page 36. All right. The flight is long, Lily warned me, barely a single step outside the nest, and there aren't many places to rest. We'll be able to stop and relax our wings and perhaps eat something only once during the journey, provided we make good enough time to get to the island at low tide, while it's above water. Her eyes widened. Messias? She reached forward and tugged my hair loose of the tie I used to keep it back. She laughed. I was too preoccupied in your room to notice earlier. She pulled forward some of the front strands, allowing me to see for the first time that what had previously been silver-white was now pale blue, just a shade lighter than my eyes. Normally the change would have irritated me, since it set me even further apart from the serpents and avians who already looked at me as an oddity. However, Lily's delight was infectious. "A falcon's magic marks his body," she explained. "Your mother's violet eyes are one example." "Miss Deborah, happy Monday!" "The blue in your hair is another. It will probably darken a little more when you begin to study, though the royals don't seem to show their power as overtly as some of the others. But I'm delaying us. We should be gone. Are you ready?" "I hope so," I answered. She didn't wait for more, shifting immediately into a sleek peregrine falcon a little smaller than me. The first leg of the flight was less terrible than I had imagined, despite Lily's being able to hold an even faster pace than Eliza had ever managed. At the beginning, I delighted in spreading my wings, delighted in the ocean breeze and the smell of brine. I settled into a peaceful reflection, caught between sun and sea. Then Lily bumped in against me, her talons catching my wings to steady and lift me. With a start, I realized that I had dipped dangerously close to the waves. I shook my wings vigorously, both to gain altitude and to dry my feathers. Though we had left shortly after dawn, we did not reach the island Lily had spoken of until nearly dusk. The little bit of volcanic rock, worn smooth and covered with shelled creatures and seaweed, was an inhospitable place to rest, but I was still grateful for the chance to return to human form for a while. I arched my back, stretching my spine and then rolling my shoulders, unable to focus on fears or hopes while my heartbeat was still pounding from the exertion of the day. As she landed, Lily shed the last of her illusions, then for the first time stood before me in her natural form. She ducked her head self-consciously as I stared, shocked by the transformation. Her face and form were very similar to before, but her skin had paled to cream. Her hair was a shade darker than mine, but still the color of honey in milk. In the front, it became cobalt and indigo, like gemstones spun into silk. Her eyes, previously a very ordinary blue-gray, now picked up the colors of the ocean and of her hair, so that they, too, shone like fair jewels. And she was wearing her wings, enormous peregrine wings that tumbled down from her shoulders and nearly brushed the ground at her feet. "I know it is rare in Wyvern's court for one to wear her wings openly," she said shyly, "but on Anmeek very few do not. This is what I consider my true form." She knelt and brushed a hand over the kelp that covered the island, clearing a bare, smooth space large enough for both of us to sit in. "I hope I didn't overstep my bounds with your parents earlier," she said. "This must be very hard for them. They both left Anmeek when they were young, and having their magic bound would have been terribly painful. It is not surprising that they would not think well of the royal house." "How could they?" I almost asked, thinking of my father's scars. But I kept my questions to myself when I saw the fear in her eyes. I saw them hesitate, and all I could think was they couldn't possibly know. They hadn't felt your heartbeat slow and your skin cool as your magic tried to drag you down. I shouldn't have taken my fear out on them. I reached out and she took my hand. "You're safe now, and you probably have questions." Questions. Where could I begin? Until last night, my parents had always refused to speak of magic or Anmeek. My parents had tried to forget their pasts and who they used to be. My father had changed his name entirely from Sebastian to Andreos, which he had been known by for all the years he had hidden among the avians as a crow. Both of my parents had chosen to use the surname Silvermead after their exile, in honor of the avian family that had taken my mother in when she had first fled the island, and of the dancer Valine, who had petitioned the Empress for their pardon. "What would you like to know?" Lily asked, startling me from my thoughts. I had to stop drifting off. Of course, that was exactly what this trip was about, wasn't it? "That moment in the woods, the one that made you so sure I had this magic, can you explain it to me?" How could I possess something I barely understood? "When a falcon's magic first appears, it often does unpredictable things," she said. I could hear her struggling to find the right words for something that was common knowledge among her people. The 3 visions might have been images from your future, necessary sights, catalysts with the power to irrevocably alter your path. Then she added with a wry smile, or they might have been nothing more than ghosts, people you might see, or even ones who sensed the sudden shift in magic and happened to look back at you. Blue and even silver eyes are so common on Anmique that I couldn't begin to guess to whom they might belong, and cobra eyes are certainly not unlikely in your future. She dismissed it all with a shake of her head. I won't go so far as to say that all visions are without meaning, but those that come unsummoned to an undisciplined mind are often nonsense. Is there anything you think that I should know before we get to Anmique? Lily paused, fiddling with a razor shell she had taken from the rocks. The island may seem very overpowering when you first land. People will be able to tell you are royal blood, and they may not know how to treat you. The royal court of Anmique is not as informal as the one you are used to, and people are likely to err on the side of caution. Araceli will probably give you leave to address her familiarly, but usually any member of the royal house is addressed as lady, or, in Servos' case, as sir. Slanting an amused gaze in my direction, she added, I suppose that means I have been horribly disrespectful with you these 2 years, calling you Nisias. The suggestion made me laugh and shake my head. I was the son of 2 guards, and only a guard myself, which placed me 1 respectful step below the lords and ladies of Wyvern's court. I couldn't imagine being treated as some kind of royalty on Anmique. Aside from you, the royal house has 4 members. Sharja is empress, but she rarely grants audiences, and it is Araceli who rules the island day to day. Sifka is right hand to both Sharja and Araceli, and often speaks for them when they are otherwise occupied. She is also the one who normally sees to any business off the island. Sifka was rarely spoken of in Wyvern's court, though I recognized her name from my parents' conversations. I understood that she had enabled my father to leave Anmique the first time, and helped my mother and father both return from the island after Araceli had taken them. If Araceli proved herself as malicious as my father had painted her, then perhaps I would find an ally in Sifka. Servos, the last of the 4, is guardian to the Schmeckel. As my parents had, she spoke the word softly, her gaze haunted. You should recall that we Falcons share history with the Serpient, not the Avians, she continued. If I had considered more carefully, I would have disguised myself as a serpent instead of an avian in Wyvern's court, so I would not need to deal with men who felt like they had to protect the honor of a woman living alone, and were shocked if I displayed an unseemly emotion. She shrugged, but I understood her point. Only the Serpient influence in Wyvern's court had given her the freedom to maintain her independence while utilizing such a disguise. You'll find that most Falcons are as free with their emotions as the Serpient. What else? She asked, pondering. I saw her gaze at the edge of the island, which had already lost several inches to the rising tide. It would not be long before our dry resting place became ocean once again. Of course, the old language is spoken on Anmique. You've been studying it in your history lessons at Wyvern's court, but it might take you a little while to perfect its use. Not too long, I hoped. Anmique is in your blood, Lily added, as if she could read my mind. His words will feel natural to you. She leaned on me, her body warm against mine. It is a beautiful land, Nisias. Though I have enjoyed seeing other places these last 2 years, I have missed the White City. I have missed hearing her sing and seeing the magic dance and being among others who see my blue and know what it means instead of simply fearing it. You will see. Wyvern's court is a lovely place, but it is not Anmique. Oh, please don't fall. Chapter 5. We shifted into our human forms just above the ground and landed on a marble terrace. My knees almost went out from under me. I was so exhausted. We had flown throughout the night, and it was now well past sunup once again. I was barely aware of the audience we had attracted until someone spoke to me. Even once I lifted my head to listen to his words, I had no idea what he was saying. If I had been less exhausted, I probably could have translated the old language, but right then my mind refused to obey. I blinked at him for a moment, trying to figure out what was going on. Thankfully, Lily noticed my confusion. "He wishes to know if you need anything," she told me. I knew what I needed: sleep. I was having trouble standing upright. I felt as if I was being buffeted by winds from all directions, and my vision was blurry from exhaustion. I should greet the Empress first, I thought, or... Lily stepped forward to answer for me. Her voice rang with authority, the rolling language of Unmeek coming easily to her despite the 2 years she had spent in Wyvern's court. After a moment, she turned back to me and added, "They will find you somewhere to rest and something to eat if you wish it. I apologize, but I must leave you in the capable hands of our welcoming committee, so I can present myself to my lady and let her know I am ready to return to my duties. Get some sleep." "I can help you to your room, sir," a young man offered, making an effort to speak a language I knew. As tired as I was, I did not fail to notice that the rooms I was given were more elegant than the ones Eliza occupied back in Wyvern's court. If the pale stone and crystal sculpture lacked some of the warmth of that place, they made up for it with sparkling beauty. My guide left me in the hands of 2 women, each wearing loose slacks and backless shirts, and each graced with wings that matched my own peregrine. Everyone I had seen so far had worn demi-wings, as Lily had said. And everyone, either the language I knew or the language I could barely understand, seemed to want to know what I needed. While I fought to stay awake, being waited on was fine with me. I wouldn't be able to exert any kind of effort if I tried. The meal I was served was simple but delicious: freshly baked bread still hot from the oven, a savory fish soup that warmed me to the core, and hot cider to drink. As I ate, I was entertained by a choir somewhere outside the building. The words faded in and out of my awareness, but the melody was haunting. Food and a moment to regain my bearings had helped enough that when I was asked, "Would you like a bath readied, sir?" I had the sense to answer, "My name is Nisias." The woman nodded. "Yes, sir." Being called sir again sent a chill down my spine. "You can call me Nisias." Her eyes widened a little, but she repeated, "Nisias. Would you like... I think I'd rather sleep first, if you don't mind." "Of course," she answered. "You have been shown your room?" "Yes, I'm fine. Please, I'd just like to sleep now." Within 2 breaths I was left alone to seek my bed, accompanied only by the distant singing. The bed was larger than I was used to, as everything here seemed to be, but firm enough to be comfortable and piled with the softest blankets I had ever touched. Only as I was looking for a lamp or candle to snuff out did I realize that the abundant light seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, more specifically from intricate designs etched into the stone. If I knew how to use falcon magic, I would probably be able to turn them off, I thought, with as much humor as I could muster. For now, I would have to be content with light, but the instant I lay down and got settled, the lights dimmed and finally shut off. The effect startled me so much that I stood up, prompting them to gradually brighten until I lay down again. The colors in my dreams seemed brighter than usual, and the sounds softer. A melody wove itself through everything, sometimes sounding like a chorus of hundreds of singing in harmony all around me, and sometimes sounding like a lone child far away. No matter how I tried, I couldn't quite make out the words. Visions came and disappeared throughout the night. A woman was kneeling on a floor of pure white stone with her head bent forward. Her hair was so white it seemed almost translucent, except at the front, where it darkened to violet and finally almost black. It fell forward, hiding her face and pooling on the floor around her. Silks that shimmered from deep indigo to silver wrapped her form in a complex gown. Suddenly I realized that those silks not only clothed her, but bound her. Her wrists were crossed behind her back and tied there. Her eyes were covered and her ankles were pressed together. Despite the blindfold, she looked up as I approached. "Hej alehe genlo mehe?" the wind seemed to whisper. I found that I understood her words easily. "Do you desire to know your future?" "No," I answered. She gave a tight-lipped smile. "No man, no woman can see the future in truth. It is all the same illusion. Hej alehe ajen lo ekel? Do you desire to know your past? No, I answered again. We will be here before, she said. I don't understand. You didn't, she answered. Now you do. She began to sing, a melody slightly different than the ones I had heard earlier. It made the air ripple around us. Then the world changed, and we were standing on the cold black ice I knew from my nightmares, with the bone-white moon above. The woman's gerfalcon wings were spread, her hair whipping around her in a wind so strong I stumbled and tore the skin of my hands on the sharp ice. The silks that had bound her were gone, and now she was wearing a gown that looked to be made of woven gold. Her song had changed into a scream, one that made the ice shudder around us. This isn't your place, Nisaias, she shrieked, voice like the wind. Leave now, dance with the light, falcon child. I was thrown from my dream with the force of a thunderbolt and woke breathless. I flung myself out of bed and was grateful when the light snapped on. The door to the next room had been left partially open, revealing a bath that had been prepared recently enough that the water was still perfectly warm. Or perhaps magic had kept it that way for hours. I didn't know or care. I scrubbed my skin and hair, dried with a soft towel, and dressed in clothing that had been hung while I had slept. The pants were made of a material that was softer and warmer than any I was familiar with. In lieu of a belt, they had a silver clasp on each side. The legs were comfortable and unrestricting, but laced tightly at the calves. The shirt was similar, designed to be loose around the shoulders and in the upper sleeves, but tight at the forearms and wrists. The upper back was open to allow for wings. There was no footwear, but thinking back, I didn't recall seeing any of the falcons wearing shoes the day before. I had just finished tying back my hair when the first knock came on my door. Yes? The young woman who entered was the one I had instructed to call me Nisaias the evening before. She curtsied deeply, bowing her head. I stared at her for too long, waiting for her to rise, before it occurred to me to say, "Stand up. Can I help you?" She stood with a smile as if she could have knelt on my floor all day. "I hope the room merited your approval, and you found everything you needed this morning?" Even if something had bothered me, I wouldn't have dared to say no, not to someone who was trying so hard to please me. Everything was fine. "The heir would like to see you this morning," she said, "as soon as you are ready." Before I could say that I was ready, she reached forward to change how the cuff of my shirt was laced. I pulled back so quickly that she dropped her gaze apologetically. "Please, my lady will be very cross with me if I let you go about unmeek and the palace looking like a mongrel. You don't know our ways yet. Let me help?" Despite the sincerity in her voice, I did not care for the term mongrel. I lived in a mixed-blood land. Moreover, I knew that the word's equivalent in the old language, kaimak, was considered by the Serpient to be uncivil. A fight would have broken out in Wyvern's Nest if one of the Serpient dancers had used it as casually as this woman just had. She must have seen my displeasure. I saw her pale ever so slightly. I recalled my father's warning about the Empress's mercy, and realized exactly why she was so desperate to please me. And Araceli. I bit my tongue. I didn't want to be responsible for getting this girl, or myself, into trouble. "I would appreciate your help," I said finally, "but please, teach me so I can do it right on my own in the future." She clapped her hands lightly, a gesture of relief and joy. "Of course!" Over the next few minutes, I learned one crucial thing. Falcons valued appearance far too much. I had always cared somewhat about how I looked, but that was mostly out of respect for Eliza. As one of her guards, I reflected upon her. I would try to extend that respect toward the Empress and her heir, but I couldn't help complaining when my tutor took down my hair so that she could clasp most of the blonde bulk back behind while leaving the newly blue strands loose around my face. "A falcon's blue is a thing to be very proud of," she explained when I reached forward to tuck those irritating strands back. "Not something to be hidden." I didn't have the heart to contradict her. I was beginning to look forward to meeting Araceli for only one reason. I wanted to have my powers bound, so that I could get off this island and go back to being Nisaias Silvermead. wyvern of honor, instead of some preened and pampered prince of an empire ruled by fear. Finally, she asked me to grow the wings of my demi-form. People will be very confused if they see you without them. They will wonder what you and the lady could possibly have fought about this soon. Fought? I inquired. Those who are a danger to the city or endangered by the city are not allowed to spread wing above her or wear their demi-forms. That includes criminals, pure diamond, outsiders, and mongrels. But you are pure royal blood. The only reason you would be denied access to our sky is if the Empress or her heir barred you from it. I frowned at the way she separated the classes of the city so easily. They're restricted for different reasons, of course, she added apologetically. Pure diamond is a rank for falcons who learn their magic too young. They are often disturbed and need to be bound as children to keep them from harming themselves or others. Empress Sharza prefers that they stay on land so that it is easy to reach them if they need her. As for outsiders, they are kept grounded mostly for their own protection. The city is not kind to those it does not consider its own, and it can be very disorienting from above. As for those with mixed blood, she hesitated, and I wondered if she had intentionally changed her phrasing due to my response to the word mongrel. They often have trouble controlling their magic. It makes them dangerous to others and to themselves. They must stay on the ground, where the city's power protects them somewhat. And what would Araceli think of me, I wondered. Despite this girl's assurance that I was royal blood, I was most certainly an outsider. I was sworn to a mixed-blood queen, and I was the son of two of Anmeek's exiled criminals. How long would it be before I was thrown into one of those sharply defined categories? Mike, I will reply when I'm done with my reading. So give me about another half an hour. Sound good? Chapter 6. Before I could leave my room, I had to have my hair put up, my clothing corrected, and my feathers carefully preened. If this was a taste of royalty, I would have no difficulty refusing any offer Araceli might make. This much attention was more than I'd ever wanted, and stepping into the open streets was a blessed relief. In the first breathtaking moment, I realized how little of Anmeek I had seen the day before. The road, the walls, every building about me glistened with the same kinds of designs as were in my room. Only here, instead of simply remaining silver, the patterns shifted from sea foam and emerald to coral pink and bruised cranberry. The designs seemed to dance to the music that I suddenly realized was coming not from a chorus, but from the walls. Magic. The road beneath my bare feet was warm, and though it looked hard as crystal, when I stepped down it felt as soft as a carpet. What are the towers ahead of us? I asked, pointing to the three pure white spires in the north. Yenna Marl, my guide answered. They are called simply the White Towers, and they mark the boundaries of the testing yard. The rest of the city holds spells to keep her inhabitants' magic in check so that they can learn faster than their power can grow. But in that yard, the magic is even stronger than it is in the outside world. Careful not to stray there. The way the magic flares can be dangerous until you have more control. I nodded, appreciating the advice. We had reached the arched doorway of a grand building that seemed to be made entirely of crystal, perfectly clear, save what must have been hundreds of layers of magic. We paused at the doorway, and I tried to follow the patterns as they wove under and over each other. Suddenly it seemed so obvious. It's writing, isn't it? I asked in surprise. What does it say? My guide looked startled. It's not writing in the sense that you know. But here, I argued, tracing one line. I couldn't make my eyes follow it exactly, but I still understood. It's a prayer. We should go inside, she said. One moment, please. I struggled to grasp what I was reading. The longer I watched the pattern, the more loudly it seemed to speak to me. A prayer to Anmeek. Then the voice from my dream the night before whispered, Nisias, child of she who is heir to the domain of ice and night, you sing here so clearly, so careful, Nisias, remember. We will be here before. Nisias! I was wrenched back by the shoulders, spun around so quickly that I felt dizzy, and reached out a hand to support myself. Someone grabbed my wrist, steadying me as I blinked away my confusion. Vesake mana, my guide was mumbling from where she was kneeling beside us. Kagen lakin, the woman who had caught me, replied. It took me a moment to translate the brief exchange. I'm sorry, lady, not your fault. And meanwhile the woman caught my arm. Sinele, she said, dismissing my guide before addressing me. Nasias, come inside. I did as instructed, my throat parched and my eyes unfocused. Careful, Nasias, or we'll lose you to the Schmeckel before the day is out. Do you know nothing of your magic? Did your father... Of course not. She sighed. She pressed a cup into my hands and said, drink. The liquid burned my tongue as I gulped it down too quickly, but it also managed to clear my head. Suddenly I realized that my guide had addressed this woman as lady, as she was either the empress or the heir, or her heir then. My gaze snapped up, and instantly I knew which one. Those eyes. I knew them from that moment in the woods, when my magic had first appeared. It was her gaze that had first looked upon me. Furthermore, these were the ice-blue eyes that looked back at me from the mirror every day. Softened in some places and sharpened in others, her face was nearly the female version of my own. She smiled as I looked at her, scanning my features as I did hers. Son of my son, she greeted me, Nasias of Unmeek. Silvermead, I corrected automatically before it occurred to me that I might offend her. She shook her head, laughing a little. Your mother might have taken the name Silvermead, but your father was my son. You have the powerful wings of a peregrine, as he did, and as I do. If you did not have our magic, the songs would not call to you the way they do. Ever since I felt your magic wake a few days ago, I have known that you are worthy of your royal blood. On this island that makes you Nasias of Unmeek, nothing less. I wanted to ask what she'd meant when she said that she had felt my magic wake, why I had seen her so briefly, and who the other eyes had belonged to, for if hers had been real, then perhaps the others had been too. Instead, I hardened my heart against the joy I could see in her face and forced myself to say what I needed to. I'm sorry, lady, but I don't want to be Nasias of Unmeek. I want only to be Nasias Silvermead. My parents sent me here to have my powers bound, so I can safely return to Wyvern's court. Araceli winced. Nasias, why? What can you have there that is more than we can give you here? You weren't raised to rule, so I can understand you being daunted by that. You weren't raised in luxury, so I can understand you are not desiring the finer things Unmeek can provide you. But what does that world offer you? Not even love, Nasias, unless you are willing to kill any child your mate would have. Her voice softened as she implored, Give this world a chance. I started to argue, but she shook her head. Nasias, I've lived nearly 2 millennia, and I have had only one child. Letting him leave was the most painful thing I have ever done. Painful for whom? I asked, knowing that my voice was harsh, but the image of my father's scars was still bitter in my memory. You have no concept of what our magic can do if uncontrolled, she snapped. Your mother might have survived, though few born with power can survive long without this land's magic to protect them. Your father certainly would not have. He didn't have the training, and royal blood cannot protect one forever. The only way I could bind their magics as tightly as I needed to was to etch the spells into their skin. Even what I did might not be enough. The marks clearly weren't as strong as they should have been, or you never would have been born with power. She spoke with such pain in her voice I couldn't help wondering if it was true. What if the wounds she dealt had been part of the spell to keep my parents' magic from killing them? Who was I to call her a liar? I who knew nothing about this dangerous power except that even my parents were frightened by it. I'm sorry, lady, I replied, shamed by my arrogance. She sighed. Forgiven, and please, Nasias, to you I am Araceli. I nodded. Araceli, I'm sorry for my impertinence a moment ago, but I still don't think this place is right for me. As you said, I wasn't raised with luxury or servants hovering over me and calling me sir. I don't think I would become used to it or even want to. Again she laughed a little, the sound like bells. Nisias, consider for a moment. For one, you are fascinating to most of the people of Anmeek. Very rarely is one of us born off the island, much less one of royal blood. Furthermore, they didn't know how much attention you would demand. If you were spoiled and arrogant and wanted to be pampered, but they ignored you, you would be far more cross than if you were modest and kind and wanted only to be left alone while they hovered. If you let them know that you prefer to be treated like an equal, that is how they will treat you. It was difficult to reconcile the horrible person my father and mother had warned me about with the woman I was speaking to now. Come and walk with me, Nisias, Araceli requested. Let me present you to Empress Sharza, and then I shall show you around our island. You can tell me this evening whether you want your powers bound so soon. I'll warn you now, it will hurt, and it will leave you marked, and it will be irreversible. To bind your magic, I must bind your falcon form. You'll never be able to spread wing again, Nisias. I pray you will give this world a chance before you decide to throw it all away. We walked through the palace, but its wonder was lost to me. Pain I could deal with if I had to. My training in Eliza's guard had taught me how to brace myself against necessary pain. Marks I could deal with. My falcon blood had already marked me, setting me apart from the others at Wyvern's court, both physically and mentally. I could stand losing magic I had never expected, and a royal position I had never wanted, too. But never to fly again? Never to set off into the sky I loved, alone or with Eliza? Never to return to the distant lands that could be reached only by wing? I wouldn't lose just the air. I would lose Wyvern's court. With none of the strengths of a falcon, a serpent, or an avian, I would have nothing to offer as Eliza's guard. They might let me stay out of pity, but living the rest of my life in the face of that pity would destroy me. Yet both of my parents had avian forms, even though their magic had been bound. How did my parents get their winged forms? Araceli winced as she answered. Force change. It is one of the higher level abilities and forbidden on the island in all but the most desperate situations. It is a way to temporarily take control of another's magic and body. Afterward, a skilled user of our magic retains a memory of the forms of the person he changed. Why is it forbidden? Araceli looked at me as if I was mad. To violate another's body, magic and mind is so intimately is... She shook her head. Among my people, forced change is seen in the same light as the serpents you were raised among see rape. If it is so abhorrent, I said tightly, then why was it taught to both of my parents? Kel was taught to force change because she was one of the Empress's personal guards, and although the Mercy almost never need to utilize such a skill, a guardian of the royal house must be armed with as much knowledge as she can have. Sebastian, her voice wavered as she said my father's falcon name. He was royal blood, as you are. I had no need to teach him any specific pattern. He could discover it on his own, as in time you probably will be able to, too. If you decide not to go through with this self-destructive binding, I will teach you the discipline you need to keep your magic from harming you. The rest, for royal blood, comes naturally. I still have trouble imagining my parents doing something they were raised to feel was so evil. Araceli backtracked gracefully, but the distaste was not completely gone from her voice as she added, I am sure your parents did it out of desperation. I understand both of them were attempting to save another's life. Even in this city, they would not have been reprimanded for that effort. I wanted to ask more about that story, but Araceli's tone made it clear that the discussion was over. We walked silently for a minute and soon approached a pair of doors, each pale blue with a pattern like silver frost on the glass. A falcon's guard stood on each side of them, watching us warily. Please tell Sharza that I would like to introduce her to Sebastian's son, Araceli told the guards. I regret to inform you that the lady is not receiving today, one answered. Both dropped their gazes as Araceli frowned. I'm not some mongrel seeking to petition for a favor, she said coolly. The door opened, and out stepped a falcon I recognized from history book sketches. Sifka. She bowed respectfully to Araceli, but her voice held poorly concealed annoyance as she explained. You won't be able to speak to her. I've already pushed my way past these guards. The lady is occupied with no time for conversation. Under her breath, she grumbled, "As she has been for weeks." Araceli sighed and glanced at me apologetically. "Nisias, allow me to present Sifka, Aplomado of the royal house and our ambassador on the mainland. Sifka, this is Nisias, son of Kel and Sebastian." Sifka's gaze fell on me, and I saw a hint of regret in her eyes as she greeted me politely. "An honor to be introduced, sir." Before I could reply, she turned back to Araceli. "My lady, might I have a few moments of your time?" "Can it wait? I would rather not leave Nisias alone on his first day in our city." "As you wish, but it is a matter of some importance to both of us. I had wished to take it up with Sharza directly." She shrugged. "It seems the lady has more pressing concerns than her own kingdom." Araceli looked at Sifka sharply, and the Aplomado quickly assured her, "No disrespect intended. As for Nisias, he is blood of our house. The land and his people will protect him if he needs it. Anmik would never betray its prince, so he is in no danger wandering alone, and perhaps he would appreciate a few minutes unchaperoned to think." Seeing my dismissal very near, I interjected, "If I might ask for one favor." "Yes," Araceli replied. "Before I make my decision on whether to stay or go, I would like to speak to my parents." They had warned me not to trust this woman. I did not know whether she was speaking the truth about my magic and my falcon form. "Nisias, Nisias," Araceli sighed, "when you leave this island it must be with your magic either bound or mastered. Right now the island is protecting you from yourself, and yet you are still hypnotized by your power at the doorway to the palace. If you try to leave now, you'll fall and drown while you're busy listening to Eccles' whispers and watching the paintings in the waves." I recalled the way Lily had needed to grab my wings so I wouldn't fall on my way to the island. I didn't think I could risk a return trip. "Then might one of them come here?" "Your parents are both in exile," Araceli told me bluntly, "but you are the heir to the Empress. You must have the authority to lift that sentence long enough for them to speak to me. If you have been honest so far, then there is no risk to you in my speaking to them." Sifka took a step back as I made that statement. Even before Araceli tensed, looking as offended as if I had struck her. "I do not have that authority. That is my Lady Sharza's decision to make, as she is the one who put down the sentence upon each of them. Even if it was my decision," she continued, "I would not allow them back. When they fled this island, they endangered themselves, and they endangered those they'd sworn their loyalty to on the mainland. Your mother fled her responsibility to the Empress Sharza the first time she was called upon to protect her liege. Tell me, Nisias, what is the sentence among Oliza's wyverns for a guard who abandons his post and allows his monarch to face an assassin alone?" She did not wait for me to unravel my tongue and attempt to answer. Among the Serpient and the Avians, what she was describing would be high treason and punishable by death. "In the years since they left," she said more softly, "it seems that both of your parents have matured. Their positions among the Avians are respected, and their loyalty is unquestioned. Perhaps they have learned their lesson. But that does not excuse their first crimes. They abandoned this land when it needed them. If you stay as prince, you might have the power to pardon them some day. But until then, I will not allow either one to set foot in my city." "What unforgivable crime did your son commit?" I asked tentatively. Araceli's tone when she spoke of my father was like ice. "Sebastian of Anmik is dead. There is a crow who holds his memories, a crow who holds his blood but not his features. The features I see so clearly in you. But my son, my only son, is dead to this world, dead to my people, and dead to me." "What? Silence!" she snapped, and now the pain in her eyes was apparent. "On this topic, I demanded, we do not speak of that which is too late to change." "My lady, I hate to interrupt," Sifka said softly, stepping forward awkwardly, "but I must speak with you now." Araceli nodded. "Walk our city if you like, Nisias," she said distantly. "I have business I must attend to. I will summon you this evening to hear your decision. Dismissed." I took a step away from the pair, somewhat dazed by the argument. When I had just turned the first corner, I heard Araceli say to Sifka, "I suppose it is too much to ask for his trust. when his parents have surely been speaking ill of me throughout his life. Even though I speak honestly to him and say things he would accept as reasonable if they came from a serpent or an avian, he assumes they are lies. Doubtless, his parents think many of their words are deserved, Sifka answered. I hesitated, curious what else they would say when they thought I was not listening. Perhaps some of them are, Araceli admitted, but our war with the Serpient was over thousands of years ago, and yet they still teach their children a hatred of us. After a long silence, during which I almost continued on my way, she added, I cannot stand to lose another child to ancient conflict, Sifka, but how can I compete with a hatred that has endured for thousands of years? The raw pain in Araceli's voice cut me more deeply than anything she had said so far. As a child of Wyvern's court, I was far too familiar with her sentiment. I had seen serpents wary of avians, and avians wary of serpents, despite the efforts our leaders made to bring the two groups together. I had thought myself beyond that hatred because I had been born a falcon. Instead, I had learned to hate my own blood. I continued on my way out, tracing the halls I had come through with Araceli, and resolved to try to look upon what I found here with a more open mind. I would not dismiss everything my parents had told me, but I would try not to be as biased as an avian matron watching the serpents dance. All right. Chapter 7. Once back outside, I hesitated at the foot of the palace. I might have dreamed of the chance to explore this city, but to stand at its edge with no destination and no guide was overwhelming. In the distance, I caught a glimpse of an elegant spire shimmering like a violet mirage on the horizon. Thinking that landmark was as good a destination as any, I started forward, only to find that the roads of Anmeek twisted in unpredictable ways. What had seemed to be a straight path only moments before turned out to curve, so that after several minutes I found myself on the cliffs where the ocean met the island. Turning back, I could see the city, the three Yenamarl, bone white and sharp against the sky, a trio of arches that seemed to be in the center of the city. Again, I could see only the edge of the strange violet spire. I tried following the beach and found myself by a bridge that seemed to connect Anmeek to another, smaller island, one peppered with lush greenery. Exploring that area would have to wait. I had a feeling I was lost enough as it was. I glanced behind me, wanting to confirm that I could still see the Yenamarl and get my bearings from them. The odd tower that had caught my attention was practically brushing against the road on which I now stood. How could that be? It seemed almost as if the walls were made of liquid, and the violet that had seemed so bold at a distance was muted up close. The arched doors were smoke-black glass, slick and ominous in the white city. They had no handles, though I could see the seam between the two. Two symbols marked that doorway. Schmeckel. If you can't, it will destroy you, my father had warned me. It will numb your body and mind until it drives you into what is called Schmeckel. There are rooms on Anmeek filled with those who have succumbed to it, those who could not learn to control their power. They are neither alive nor dead, neither awake nor asleep. I pushed against the doors almost in a daze, bracing myself for whatever lay beyond, and yet needing to see the fate my parents feared so much. Inside, the building was completely silent. All day I had been listening to the songs Anmeek sang, music that seemed to seep from the walls and roads, but now I felt as if I had been struck deaf. The air was heavy, so thick with power that walking was like trying to move underwater. The hall in which I stood was round, with a silver-domed ceiling, and walls that were pale at the top but darkened to nearly black where they touched the floor. A spiral ramp circled along the edges of the room, ascending to where it hid the rest of the ceiling from my view and descending beneath the level of the floor. All along the walls were doorways, some open and some closed. Maenka mehe hena hej? Maenka las? A deep voice asked. What lies beyond mehe, beyond eternity? The old language came more easily to me now, and I understood what he said as he continued. Nothingness, Ekel, that which never was and never can be. Commonly it is translated as destruction, but more accurately it is lack of existence. I turned to find a man whose body and face made him appear a few years younger than I, but whose eyes, liquid blue like the ocean, gave him away as being ancient. The minds of the Schmeckel are lost somewhere that we in this world can never hope to reach. Their magic is unpredictable. In some moments they lash out at hallucinations, nightmares, pain that drives them further from us. But most times they are simply still, their minds as numb and as empty as the womb of the void. "Servos?" I asked when he paused and stared into the distance. He nodded, not seeming to focus entirely on me. "And you are Nisias." "Nisias?" A voice whispered through my mind, making me jump. It was one that I had heard several days before, when I had first fallen in the woods, and then again in my dreams. Servos sighed. I heard the song from my dream, heard it, and for the first time understood the words. Of eternity, of silence, of coldness, of stillness, of echo. He who dwells with echo knows of void. He who dwells with echo knows of death. But he who dances with echo, he is lost. For he who dances with echo brings to life the world of death. So dance. The song sent a shudder down my spine. "You hear it?" Servos asked. I nodded, searching the room for the singer. "You can't see her from here. Her room is near the top of this hall," Servos explained. "Her name was Darien. She was a dancer, and part of the highest choir. Most people cannot hear her voice, even when they stand beside her. Of eternity, of madness, of heat, of movement, of Mehe. He who dwells with Mehe knows too much. He who dwells with Mehe knows of creation. But he who dances with Mehe, he is lost. For he who dances with Mehe cannot leave the dance and will face the fire. So dance." "If you'll excuse me," Servos said abruptly, "I need to see to one of my charges." He did not wait for a response from me, but turned to descend the ramp underground. Darien's song stopped and was replaced by a whispered chant. "Nisias Silvermead, Wyvern of Honor, Nisias of Anmeek, heir to the heir of she who shines in darkness, Nisias Fool Child, Nisias Wise One." The words fluttered in my ears, almost teasing, sighing along a few notes from on high. Irresistibly drawn, I started up the ramp. I thought that the Schmeckel were not aware of their surroundings, yet this woman who was supposedly one of them called me by name and by many titles, some of which I used for myself and some of which I wanted no claim to. My gaze was drawn to one of the open doorways I passed. Inside, a figure was lying on the floor, her ink-dark falcon wings crumpled behind her, broken and scored by tar-like bands of black and crimson. Unlike the graceful, delicate designs that painted the White City, these marks were vicious and ugly, but they shone with the iridescent sheen I had come to associate with falcon magic. I did not know her by name, but I recognized the familiar line of her jaw, the texture of her ebony hair and warmth of her fair skin. I was sworn to the royals of Wyvern's court, which included the Cobriana, and I could not fail to note that this young woman had cobra blood. I knelt and put a hand on her arm, needing to try, even though I had little hope of stirring her. Without warning, I found myself back in my nightmares. The black ice rippled and warped, jutting skyward to form razor-blade walls, uneven and maze-like. Beneath it, I saw shadows moving, talons and fangs scraping the ice as they reached for me, and I shuddered. I leapt aside as a serpent reared its head, blocking my path, the tips of its milky fangs glistening with drops of venom. As I stumbled, my arm brushed against one of the jagged walls of ice, and I gasped in pain as my skin was sliced open. It is only illusion, I told myself, hoping that was true. I stepped toward the serpent. There were glints of red in its eyes, like the vermilion magic on the girl's black feathers. It spread its hood, but there was no crest on its back as I was used to from my dealings with other cobras, only this slick black on black. "I see you've met my daughter. Hi." Darien's voice whispered through the land. "Her father was..." The cobra slid soundlessly into the ice, and the jagged landscape smoothed as Darien trailed off, leaving a lingering sense of sorrow. Your mother could walk the minds of those no one else could touch, Darien told me. It seems you have inherited her skill. I don't recommend it, not here in the halls of Schmeckel. The minds of Eckel's lovers are unfriendly places. Come to me. We need to speak. She pushed me from the illusion. The first thing I realized when I returned to reality was that my arm truly was cut. The cloth of my shirt was not torn, but the skin beneath was. My own blood had darkened the fabric. A black coil of magic, like that which wrapped High's wings, had twined around my hand, and I could feel where it snaked up my arm and across my shoulder. Cold seeped from the tar-like bands. I stood unsteadily, holding my hand against my chest and wondering whether Servos would be able to explain all this to me, or maybe Darien herself. A few wobbly steps up the ramp took me to another doorway, and behind this one I heard a voice I knew. My lady suggested that I visit you this morning to make sure I am ready to return to her side. I had a dream last night, you see, Lily was saying to a still form before her, in which you woke. You came back to me. She sighed. This morning when I first opened my eyes, I thought for a moment that it was true. She tensed and without turning said, Nisias, meet my brother Myrrh. Lily pushed herself to her feet so I could see her brother clearly. Myrrh's features would have given away their relationship even if Lily had not spoken of it. He knelt on the floor, his wings tucked behind him, his head bowed and his hands on his knees. The posture was so relaxed and peaceful, he looked as if he was about to draw breath and stand. Oh dear, Lily whispered as she took in my condition and swiftly crossed the room to take my hand. Someone should have warned you. The Schmeckel who respond to nothing else can sometimes still sense royal blood. Not all of them are happy to be drawn from their dreams. Hold a moment, I can fix this. As she spoke, she unlaced the cuff of my sleeve and pushed the material off my arm to assess the damage. The bleeding had already stopped, and now the black lines on my skin began to fade away. Even the bloodstains on my shirt disappeared. Who was it? She asked. A girl, further down. She looked like she had cobra blood. Hi, Lily said softly. Her father was a serpent who came to this land several years ago. Her mother... She shook her head. The Empress's laws forbid our kind from having children with outsiders, because they always turn out this way. Their magic grows too quickly, too wildly. As a young child, Hai would become lost in illusions no one else could see. One day she stopped speaking. Finally, a few years ago, she fell while dancing. She lost control of her magic, and you can see what it did to her. Even if she regains her mind, her wings are broken. She will never fly again. With all the magic on this island, there is no one who can heal her? I asked. Hai is... Lily hesitated, seeming to look for words that wouldn't offend me. It may sound harsh, but she is mixed blood. The cobra blood in her is like a poison. It will always burn her, and it will burn anyone who tries to save her. Those few who are strong enough to mind-walk the Schmeckel are needed elsewhere. They cannot afford to risk themselves trying to save one Pitvan dancer. She might be one Pitvan dancer on Anique, but all I could see were her torn wings and tortured body, and the pain she must be in. Walking out of those halls with Lily, while leaving that broken cobra behind, went against every vow I had ever taken as a wyvern of honor, but I had to do it. There was no way to help her. And with that, that will draw our reading to a close for this evening. Whew. A little bit more Falcon magic language in this episode. I'm trying, I really am. I'm gonna absolutely screw it up, but I'm gonna keep trying. So thank you guys so much for joining me this evening for a book reading. Let me see here. I have some announcements to make, so let's see. First and foremost, I'm going to be out of town next week. So I will not be doing a book reading next Monday. So that will push us to the 30th. So the day before Halloween. So I will be doing a reading. It will not be this. We're going to take a break from this for a Halloween evening read. So I've got a huge book full of ghost stories and poems that are Halloween appropriate. So I am going to read from that for a while for you guys. So I hope you all are looking forward to that. I'm sorry I'm not going to be here next week. I have an event. I'm going to be out of town, and I probably could bring my stuff with me to read, but I don't know what the connection's going to be like where I'm going, and I don't really know what my schedule's going to look like when I'm away, so we'll just skip next week and go right to October 30th, and it will be a Halloween read, so I hope you guys are excited about that. I know I am. I love Halloween. It's one of my absolute favorite holidays. So until then, I hope you guys have a fantastic week, a great weekend. Stay hydrated as always, and keep yourselves and each other safe. And I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.